Alrighty. Well, it looks like it's picking up the wrong damn game. Can't have that. Okay. I haven't streamed in a while. My channel is pretty much deader than Charlie Kirk. Probably gonna get demonetized for that one. But seriously, fuck Charlie Kirk and fuck his fans. That's the tone we're going for today. Because I figured it out. I figured it the fuck out. I've been right all along, and I've been censored by this bullshit algorithm. Anyways, I've been playing quite a bit of Elden Ring Nightreign lately. Gotten kind of back into it. I've been creating an interesting build. Yesterday I tried to do this with finding great swords because I wanted to get the what is it? There's a weapon that I was trying to farm. It's the Mariah's Executioner sword. I was trying to make a build where I could get that easy. Unfortunately, the only yellow improved attack power with +3 katanas equipped is a wilder one, but it works out pretty well anyways. This is what I'm running. I got Balancer Relics plus that where it boosts attack but lowers damage negation while attacking. I got physical attack up and physical attack up. Only real issue is my resistances are low, but that's not horrible. Anyways, this is kind of what I was saying, right? So what I'm saying is this is kind of my bigger point with Iran and conflict and the world and religion and all that shit and anti-Semitism. I'm going to talk about all the things you're not supposed to talk about, since it's what I like to talk about most. After I take a sip of my energy beverage that doesn't provide energy. We'll get into it. Oh, fucking balancers. Alright. Balancers aren't the worst. The point I am going to get at with the government is pretty simple. When it comes to whether we have money to pay the GI Bill or not, or whether we have money to pay for poor people, sorry, we don't have no money. But when it comes to blowing up kids in other countries, I love blowing up Arab kids especially, there's always money. And it's like, basically, the Republican Party are like a white Al-Qaeda. They don't have enough money to educate the kids. They don't have enough money to pay for the kids' health care. But they do have enough money to put kids in body bags. That's the problem. When you look at the big picture of things. But anyways, I'm going to try and focus on the game. See if we can get a decent crappy egg. That's not bad. I'm gonna be like a dog, suck all of the things Hooray! Let's go. Messes. One. suck at Elden Ring if I talk too much. I'm trying to focus on important things. Anyways, you gotta be careful about things. HP up on 9 attacks is nice. But so is improvement. Not that I dodge much. But I do dodge. It's just good to be able to not actually get hit. My point is pretty simple. As I see it, I see Islam, Christianity, and Judaism as equally detestable. Now, some people could say that that makes me one of those filthy, terrible, horrible anti-Semites. Well, I would disagree with that. Because I devalue each religion equally, but even though I devalue each religion equally, I can still differentiate between a moderate who opposes human rights abuses and a garbage person who uses their religion to justify human rights abuses. This is my problem. My problem is that I was raised around a lot of biblical beliefs. I can't say that was all of my family, but it was definitely a large part of my community. And some. Now, my perspective on this, ironically, is that a lot of the times it's the worst people in each faith that have a better justification for their human rights abuses than the moderates. People will quote Jesus to say, you know, the Bible doesn't approve of all of these bad things, but quoting Jesus doesn't change the fact that Leviticus 25 and 1 Samuel 15:3 are in the text. That's kind of my point. Well, it is my point. My point is, it's always the people. Why is this jellyfish not dead? Dude, they just crashed our fucking game. Hard. Anyways, my point is that it's always the shitty religious people that have a scriptural justification for abusing human rights. Like in the slavery versus abolition debate, it was the pro-slavery Christians that had federal scriptural basis. Oh, bitch. For their religion. That sucks. I was having fun. It's always the shitty Christians that have a better scriptural basis for their shittiness than the moderates, and the same could even be said for the Jews and the Muslims too. I'm not saying this to be an asshole. I'm saying it to point things out for what they are. Man, that was a good run. It was just a, like, I just hope it was a connection issue. I didn't leave. Because that was a good start. My point If Judaism wasn't a garbage religion, Benjamin Netanyahu wouldn't be able to quote 1 Samuel 15:3 and be able to pick a verse where his God said you have to kill everyone, even the babies. I'm not saying that because I hate every Jewish person, because I don't. At the same time, I'm not a fan of the religion, and I find that Jewish extremists are just as bad as Muslim extremists and Christian extremists. But there's like distinctions I make. For instance, there's people like Sam Cedar and Emma Vigeland who are very level-headed, and they're also Jewish, and I don't hate them. They're a lot of the times they're very reasonable, very rational people in the way they approach things. So it's not like, you know, I'm like some sort of Nazi that wants to do horrible things to the Jewish community. But at the same time, the Jewish community also gives us people like Dennis Prager and Ben Shapiro. And Dennis Prager and Ben Shapiro, well, they suck. You know, because they're preaching stuff like you can't have morality without God, or the Bible is the source of wisdom, and no Bible equals no wisdom. Stuff like that. And the end result of that sort of thinking is very unpleasant, you know? And it's also easily refutable, too. I bet you if you watched every single Ben Shapiro and every Dennis Prager video, you wouldn't find one situation where they proved the existence of their God. Not one. Not a single one. And that's ultimately because their whole shtick is based on an unproven assertion. Their God itself is an unproven assertion. And they don't want to acknowledge that, because to acknowledge that their whole worldview is built on an unproven assertion would stop them from having any perceived moral authority. These enemies are too slow for me. I don't like it for that reason. Decent XP. A little slow for me. About Wild is how easy it is. Alright, so again, improve. katanas, I get a damage boost with this buff. That's why this buff is such a good build. So what are these people? I love playing Scholar, but most of the time, you can't rely on people to do the work. And so, even though you can be like a perfect support, if you're good at playing a melee class, you do everybody a disservice playing something with a Scholar would be better off playing extra executive guy. Oh, I like that. That's pretty cool. It's a sleepy and spear rapier. I mean, they want to kill another Satan crayfish. It's just I'm worried that we're going to spend so much time on kill bosses that I'm not breaking the bosses. But that's pretty solid. I think I figured out the problem when I was trying to use the rot talisman. The problem with the rot talisman is you get rot from weapons. Then you get a relic. If you want to make things rot, you can do so. Not wasting the talisman. I don't know, another thing too is like I see a lot of the accusations of anti-Semitism going around, and the way that I would approach that as a person who dislikes all of the religions equally is, given the history of anti-Semitism amongst Christians and the outcomes of said anti-Semitism, I understand why the Jewish community is worried about anti-Semitism. Really. At the same time, though, a lot of the times I'll see people crying anti-Semitism over trivial offenses. Like offenses that pale in comparison to abuse that I endured as a child. And I feel like some of these people who are prone to crying anti-Semitism don't know what true hatred is actually like. Or if they do, it's not because of their religion or who their parents were. It's because... Oh crap, I'm gonna die, I'm an idiot. It's because they as an individual possess certain personality traits that make them intolerable. And they would be intolerable whether they were a Jew or a Muslim or a Christian or a Sikh, whether they were a black, white, yellow, Asian, It wouldn't matter what color they were. It wouldn't matter which womb they fell out of. They would still be insufferable people. And I'm not saying that this is what every person who is claimed to have been a victim of anti-Semitism is like, because I'm not painting with that broad of a brush. But I'm just pointing out that there exist certain people who like to cry anti-Semitism, but the truth of the matter is nobody would like them, even if, get this, they weren't Jewish. And the point I'm getting at is it comes down to how they act as people that causes people to dislike them. It isn't about them being Jewish. It isn't about what country they were born in, who their parents were, or any of that. Sometimes what they believe can be a factor, but it's rarely the sole determination of people not liking them. I mean, I'm an anti-theist, and I don't like most Christians, but I've even met devout Christians that I liked and respected because they were good people, regardless of the fact that they believed in hokey things that I did not believe. These people are cool. Broke the crystals on the first day, and we even killed a bunch of field bosses. I respect these people. I sadly fell off. Elevated landmass to the bottom of this chasm. The chasm did have a bottom. My bones would have had a nice time on this chasm. In my experience, I see recent anti-Semitism so often. To be a consequence of the government trying to police speech. Since we have a First Amendment, they've been trying to find an excuse to disregard the First Amendment. So the convenient excuse they have found is to label anybody who disagrees with them to be an anti-Semite. And you know, you can even see it with what happened with the Epstein network with Maria Farmer. And she made some remarks about how the Jewish people that she knew were... I'm not going to repeat her exact words, but she basically explained that they were attracted to people under the age of 18, and they thought that they were better than other people. Basically, the way she explained it is the Jewish people she knew were minor attracted persons, Jewish supremacists. And Alan Dershowitz went, and those weren't her exact words, I'm paraphrasing, but Alan Dershowitz then tried to say that she was this vile anti-Semite. And the problem is that he didn't address the merits of her accusations. He immediately jumped to the anti-Semite. Just finish the Death Knight off. Does this person at least have a... Wow. I feel wronged. I just needed him to do like 5 hit points of damage. But anyways, my point with like the Alan Dershowitz Maria Farmer issue is, you know, Maria Farmer didn't say that all Jewish people were like that, just the ones that she knew. And Dershowitz went and attacked her for being an anti-Semite, you know? And that's the issue. Like, it's the issue with the types of people I'm talking about. And the issue with the types of people that I'm talking about is that they will do detestable things. They will deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender. And then what they'll do is they will, when people call them out on what they're doing, they'll hide behind accusations of anti-Semitism. And at the end of the day, if I don't like a person who happens to be Jewish, it's not because they're Jewish. I thought Adam Sandler was a funny guy, you know? I appreciate Stan Lee and his work in his comics. Sam Cedar's a reasonable guy. I don't think that the state should persecute people who are Jewish. And so at the end of the day, as I see it, I'm pretty reasonable. My big issue is I just don't like people acting in a manner that is oppressive, and then blaming the victim for their action. That's something that, when I see it, it infuriates me, no matter who I'm dealing with, and no matter what the context is. In my opinion, there are a few things that are more detestable than a person who antagonizes others and then acts as if they are the ones who are the victim. I was on a roll yesterday, but today, where's this other person? My point is, it isn't about people being Jewish. I don't like any of the religions, but I don't hate all of the people in the religions. these people have kind of been like spread out and scattered. There hasn't really been anything. They've been running around a little aimlessly since the beginning. Like that one person, they didn't like stop to help anybody fight. They just ran off. I could say that I ran off afterwards. Figured if we were doing the split up and look for crystals approach, we'd split up. Alright, so where are we going? I suppose I'm like kind of annoyed because there just hasn't been any marking where we're going or what the plan is. So I've kind of been like, what's the plan, man? Find vehicles. About the worst Elden Ring binge ever. So I think despite parts at the start being rough, this is going to be decent because we have all of the crystals broken on day 1. And at level 7, I mean I could be like higher level, but even though I'm only level 7, I still have the damage resist talisman at +2, so that's good. I suppose this is the point that I would make too. A person who's in the class that I'm talking about would try to conflate them with the entire Jewish community. But for them to do that is a huge disservice to the Jewish community. Because at the end of the day, the entire Jewish community is not as unlikable as Dennis Prager or Alan Dershowitz. That person can say that that's mean, but, I mean, these are unlikable people. talking with crappy ideas. I suppose, were I to be a bit more spot on with my analogy, for some of these people to say that they are hated simply because they're Jewish would be like Adolf Hitler saying that people hated him because he was German. They could say that, oh well, you know, horrible people compare people they don't like to Nazis, but that's not quite, like, it's to ignore the principle. The principle is really unpleasant. I mean, on the upside, this weapon is kick-ass damage. Yeah, for a lot of the people who cry anti-Semitism, it would be like, or not just Hitler, any Nazi for that matter, saying that you don't like them because they're German. It's like, no, I don't like you because you have a bad ideology. Are probably my least favorite thing about the DLC. as a reasonable person, because you'll want to just go to the next area and farm some legendaries. This does a lot of damage. Probably the least effective ever. Well, okay, then the problem too, when you start talking about unlikable people who happen to be Jewish that cry anti-Semitism, is then it creates a paradox. It's like, are they not liked because of real anti-Semitism? Because sometimes that may be the case. Sometimes they may run into somebody who really is genuinely an anti-Semite. I mean, I run into the same issue as an atheist. Some people, they hate me for no reason, or they hate me because they think I'm unlikable, which I can deal with. Some people, they hate me just because I don't believe in the same God as they do. But they're two different things. A person hating me because I'm an atheist is different than a person hating me because I'm a smug asshole who doesn't give a shit about me. Two different things. Just as the same goes with the Jewish people. Some people who happen to be Jewish, they suck at every metric of being a human being, independent of their Jewishness. And you gotta differentiate. Is this person being hated because they're Jewish? Or is this person being hated because they're unlikable? You know? You gotta differentiate the two. Because, like, it's almost more moral to hate somebody because they're unlikable as opposed to just their identity alone. I mean, hating someone just because of their identity is just bigotry, plain and simple. Hating someone because they're unlikable, well, that's what any reasonable person would do, you know? So, like, what I find is awful here is people being shamed for not liking people that they shouldn't like. And I suppose that's kind of it, too. If somebody doesn't like me because they think I'm unlikable, I'd almost prefer them. I'd almost prefer them to be like, you're fucking unlikable. I don't like you. Like, you know? It sucks to be me at that point, you know, but... But I think that a lot of people, they don't know what it's like to be genuinely hated, and so they assume that all hatred directed at them is based upon their identity. They assume it. They can't differentiate the two. And well, it's not that they can't, it's that they don't want to. Because if they were to acknowledge that they're unlikable, they would then have to reach the uncomfortable conclusion that people are justified in not liking it. And they can't do that because that, right there, doesn't apparently do as much damage as I thought it can't do it is because that hurts their ego, which they've spent all of this time building up. I like Ordovus's great sword. I also like getting hit points back when I get critical hits. But at the same time, if somebody doesn't like me just because I'm an atheist, I'm fine with that too, because I just do not like them. I think the bigger problem of dealing with people like the people we're talking about is that they want the freedom to not like other people and be bigots, but they don't want other people to have the exact same rights and privileges as them. For them, bigotry against gays or atheists or Muslims are totally fine. But bigotry against their particular demographic, Christian, Muslim, or Jew, totally not okay. That's a line you can't cross. And that's the irony. You're fine with bigotry when it's directed at anybody besides them. I'm not even a Mogwin Sacred Spear enthusiast. I find it a lame weapon that doesn't do nearly enough. Ah, crap. No, I didn't go the wrong way. I'm a double fucking idiot. I am like maybe a quadruple idiot. This person's fucking cool. I like them. It was very nice. Arr. Hopefully this boss doesn't hit like a stepfather like this. This map is always a challenge. So yeah, I suppose then, yeah, if you were to like break it down, If there was a Jewish person I didn't like, it wouldn't be because they're Jewish. Actually, because they have acted in a way that I have deemed to be detestable in some way, shape, or form. Fucking iframes, man. That's bullshit. I suppose that's kind of the point. The point is, I didn't even press that. There's a difference between not liking someone because of their behavior and then not liking them solely on the grounds of their own. However, I would point out that there is a point of intersection. And I'll explain. This guy's... It's almost like his whole shtick is invading the house. And what I speak of is when, because this gets to the heart of the discussion that people have forgot has been taking place. Because a lot of this bit on the anti-Semitism hysteria exists. To obfuscate from an older discussion. The older discussion, which I'll get to in a second, when I can reorganize my thoughts. We're going to get to this. The discussion that's being forgotten is this. Non-religious people are expected to show nuance towards religious people. Yet, oftentimes, these very same religious people lack nuance themselves. Want an example? I'll give you Benjamin Netanyahu's Amalek comment. He argued that the Palestinians are Amalek. And when you argue that the Palestinians are Amalek, you're citing 1 Samuel 15:3, which is the verse where God tells the Jewish people in the Old Testament that they need to kill all of the Amalekites, all of their animals, and even their infants. And when Saul decides that he's not going to kill all the animals after he's killed all the infants. God is disappointed that he made Saul king. He regrets making Saul king. My point is that a lot of the times these groups who will demand that you show them deference will have members of their own community who will not show other people the deference that they demand from others. And that's the issue. That's the issue, and that's the debate between the moderates and the non-moderates. was rough. It was also very close. Give him a clap, clap, clap-a-roo. That was frickin' hairy. So that one gives me upped for poison. Yeah, that's no good though. Oh, but it has physical attack +4. It looks too suicidal for me. Yeah, going back to the Netanyahu remark, or like, there was a time back, I believe in the Falwell era, where they would say that like all gay people were pedophiles or something, and then you got the Steadfast Baptist Church, who's arguing that gay people should be shot in the head. You know? Like, my point, and it might be considered a harsh point. That could be cool if I was a wizard. Not that I ever play wizard. That could be good if I was a cleric. Not that I ever play cleric. My point is that religious people oftentimes demand respect that they don't provide people outside their faith. And because of that, I tend to not like most religious people. It's not, but like you could say, well, not all religious people are like that. But what I would say is it doesn't change the fact that those are the sorts of sentiments that come out of their faith. And so it's like, do I hate moderates? No. I don't hate moderates, but at the same, and I especially respect moderates who are willing to stand against the most radical voices in their faith. But what I would point out is that there's no amount of moderate Christians, moderate Muslims, or moderate Jews being reasonable that can undo the damage that is caused by members of their community who vilify other people outside of it. Because essentially, what happens is they'll be like, oh, well, we don't want you saying bad things about Christians. Well, you have Christians that are literally arguing for your extermination from behind the pulpit. Or they'll say, you know, we don't want you saying bad things about Jews. Well, you have members of the Jewish community arguing an entire population should be exterminated. You know? And I suppose this is like the hidden subtext of the discussion that a lot of people are neglecting or ignoring. And it's largely I've taken a pretty indiscriminate approach as far as not liking people. As I see it, I don't have to like anyone. Like, where in the Constitution does it say I have to like Dennis Prager? Answer, nowhere. Where in the Constitution does it say I have to respect Dennis Prager? Nowhere. And that's kind of it. And like the whole deal of like the Shapiro Prager bit on America is founded on Judeo-Christian values. Like, not correct. And I say it's not correct because the First Amendment contradicts the First Commandment. If America was as Judeo-Christian as they claim, guess what? We wouldn't have freedom of religion. Smart. Sometimes you gotta negotiate. I'm gonna go right here real quick. Because if you're fighting enemies that can one-shot you, it's good to have weapons that can give you a chance. Was it the slug? Wilder overextended there. He should have backfilled. I know a Wilder build will typically try to push forward, but sometimes you should actually not. Like in that case, you should have stayed behind. Helped kill the rat faster. As I see it, that was 100% worth it. Reason being, I got a very powerful weapon for my level. When you look at that, successive attacks negate damage up to 60%. That's pretty cool. Okay. These people are making it mad. Hopefully I can get my souls back at least. Yeah, because, like, I almost soloed that one. It would have actually helped. Probably would have killed it. I could have done the same for the others, but these people... they lack swarm intelligence. say the biggest issue with randos is that they have a general lack of position.
There is no escape for thee, little pillager, bent on sacking the lands of gold.
Fucking game is being so rapey right now.
Well, thy journeys end.
Straight up refuses to let me level. You got Margit trying to fucking raw dog my asshole, like, right from the beginning. You got people who lack swarm intellect. It's just outright aggravating. What boss are we fighting? It's just a generally unpleasant run, despite the few things that have gone on. shots this level. The way things have been going. No, thank you. Already gonna have a challenge here because we're already low on all resources. But we do have good gear. So that's the case, I pretty much have it. Zero resistance. If I can get my talisman, I can damage him with blink. It just seems like I'm trying to damage the peripheral mobs and live because I can't damage Worm Face directly without dying. It's funny because normally he's an easy boss, but if you're running lower resistances like I am, it's actually really difficult. You know, what bothers me with that one was that we had an almost decent start until they decided to. There were just some dumb things that happened there. But yeah, anyways, my point is that when we get into this discussion of like the moderates versus the extremists, we're to a point where if you say mild things that are offensive to the Jewish community that wouldn't be considered offensive to other communities, it's blown out into anti-Semitism, yet the Prime Minister of Israel is allowed to cite passages from the Old Testament that advocate for genocide. And that's the issue. Christians do the same thing and they go, oh, it's just my sincerely held religious beliefs that lead me to conclude that we have to persecute LGBTQ people and retard Hitler the government. It's annoying stuff. This can get a little hairy if you're not careful, up. Acknowledge it. This is getting fun. We went too deep. I wanted to just pull him out towards the entrance. I also expected an ult or something. Maybe I expected too much. Maybe I misjudged the situation. I know these particular areas can get hairy at level 1, but I think we'll get it. So the biggest issue here is that if he uses the aromatic, fucking bullshit. it's rough because those people falling, picking up what I'm putting down. I fucking blocked. Oh, and now I'm stuck. The problem with these early runs is you get put in a situation where you can't level up for a long period of time. And so the game just fucking pounds you in the fucking ass like you're a transgender porn star. It's fucking awful. It's just like, come the fuck on. I just want to level the fuck up. You know? Without my fucking asshole getting plundered by every single fucking elite mob in the fucking game. Like, it's awful. God damn it. You know, I just want to... This fucking guy's gonna go in there with only like 3 bars. And he's gonna die. And it's gonna require 3 bars to bring him up. Fucking annoying, man. So annoying. I'm finally going to be able to level, and then hopefully the brutality will stop. The problem is, it's like the early game in this fucking game. If you don't get it right, you'll get fucking ruined. Raptor talons are great. See, like, this has been kind of a tricky run, but we're doing decent. It's just stressful. The very beginning especially, mainly because if you miss a deflect on an early game boss, your shit is done. You know, That's total shit. Total shit because I never chose to bring the weapon down in the first place. I shouldn't attack. This one's very also a little hairy at times, but that would be fun. This seems weird because they can do decent damage. Why is this guy dying in the most fucking hard place to be? I shouldn't have to be getting my asshole like cancer. Can't stay up. It's like they can do decent damage, but they also die a lot. Camps are the hardest to invade because the enemies in the camps are worse than the enemies in the forts. And the one thing people don't realize with a lot of these invader areas that I invade for the increased attack bonus is that they're absolutely fucking hell. Where the fuck is this other guy? Not anywhere useful. Dude, this guy's like if Pickle Rick had Down syndrome. Like he turned himself up into a peasant who lives in a hobo's ass. People can say that I'm not doing much better here, but I'm kind of in a pickle because okay, he's actually... Fucking Jesus. I mean, I almost killed him. So, like... I said some mean things about Harris, like there. I'll admit it. But it was mainly because he didn't follow the command to fight the actual base. And if you're attacking those camps are absolutely brutal, as I just demonstrated. it's a weird run, because on one hand, I'm capable of doing stupid amounts of damage. And on the other hand, holy crap, some of these engagements have been rough. Sometimes my fault, sometimes not. At this point, though, I don't know why they left that particular crucible. I would have killed him. And I mean, I don't know why Pickle Slick's over there either, because he does this. He fights on the other side of the map. And as far as that goes, I shouldn't have even gotten hit there. And it's just another case where if Pickle Slick was with the goddamn team... See, I was actually right to talk shit about him, because he doesn't fight with the team. And you could say I made a mistake fighting the Crucible Knight down there, but... I mean... Normally, people should be going off of the fucking melee character instead of going off on their own. And I suppose, for me, I just find that this run has mostly been stressful because there's no concept of staying as a group. No one's really calling the shots, and so what you're stuck with is this shit, where do you know RBC? Just fighting a Crucible Knight by their fucking self. Not very much concept of stay as a group and win the game. So like, quick, take the position of your mother's legs. Spread out. It's absolute hell to run groups that do this. Because they do a lot of damage. It's just... Why are you... Oh, why are you dumb fucks going down here? Why? Oh, these people. Oh, now they want to finish this guy. Baffled. Now we're going. It's like we're doing this the most retarded way possible. I fucking hate it. Really. want to go to the top of the fucking castle. I've already killed these people. These are the first people I've killed. Like, hey guys, we're gonna do this the least intelligent way possible. Okay guys, we're gonna do a low IQ run. Darkness right now if they would have just gone to the top of the fucking castle. I'm gonna spend this entire time. I like RVC's build, although I don't like RVC's positioning a lot of the time. As far as Pickle Slick goes, really disappointing. Because most of the time, he's off in fucking Narnia doing who knows what. Whatever it is, it isn't useful most of the time. I'd say most of this run I've just kind of been trying to figure out what the fuck my people are trying to do. hilarious. It's a good almost. I've talked a lot of shit about him. Mainly because he just walks off on me. Come on, guy. With the group. A person could say that it's mean of me to say that some people are unfair, but here's how I see it. If a person dedicates their entire life to lying to people whilst being smug and dishonest, they are what I would refer to as an unlikable person. And I don't feel bad for saying as such. Actually, that is a good point. We could buy this guy incendiary devices with which to slay our enemies with. It's a wise decision. Drop them on the ground. Especially since I don't this way. Figured out a nice thing to say about Pickles. He did a really good job resonating. I just think like what was he build? What was his build? So we had yeah, he just needed the one where you get +1 for destroying enemies. Because I don't see a whole lot that really helps him there. Because if you would have had defeating enemies increases ult gauge +1, he would have almost always had his ult. But I'm not trying to be a complete asshole. There were things he did right, but a lot of the times I just felt like he wasn't really doing a whole lot of helpful stuff. And it was making things live a lot longer than they needed to live. Because I was doing decent damage at the end. It's just my issue is I had no survivability because we didn't kill things fast enough. Oh, that's right. I'm trying to get some sort of a better look. This is an interesting system because everything has its price. See, that one's mean because you're going to always be asleep and you're going to always be taking damage, which is going to always cause rot. That, on the other hand, hello, nurse. Garbage. We'll see if I can maybe get another one or two. It's actually better to buy them 1 or 2 at a time sometimes, so that you can better sort. My issue with that whole run was that I just didn't have a lot of people backing me up. It was like if you died, you were almost certainly fucked. There were good things about the run, but it was also just a brutal run. I like having a wilder. This team comp right here is ideal, honestly. I thought RVC was doing pretty decent damage as a wizard. Like, some of those spell volleys were doing 2k each, which is respectable. It's just sometimes things are rough. Afterwards, we should take a look. That way we can have some levels before we go into fighting average It's a vanilla camp, so it should be fairly easy. Like, I shouldn't have even been in that position in the first place. Why are you both dying? Because another thing that people seem to not fucking get is that you want to be somewhat split out so that you can run a flank. It's like they have no concept of why you flank. And the reason that you flank is so that if one of you gets hit, the other two of you don't get hit. It's just... there's just so much little brain bullshit going on when you play with randoms. It's not even funny. It's annoying because I got one of those Stone Skin Lords down to almost nothing by myself. forget, can they do the other Stone Skin Lord? 2 of them? No. They can't kill the other stones. Not with 2 of them. And that's the issue. I'm fucking underleveled. It's so annoying. That was my respect. I like this group more than my last group, despite the unfortunate thing that happened. So when you're low level and you fight an Evergel that's like an elite, and you don't have the levels, it's fucking rough. It is a game where the math does not like you. I'm not fucking fighting in the goddamn darkness. Fucking Christ. It's like in fucking Overwatch. What did you think? That's exactly what it is. dealing with. Jesus fucking Christ.
So we're actually...
The biggest issue is if you're level 6 going, it's gonna be hard. However, I've got some advantages. Namely, I've got the Dragon Crest. Or the Dragon Crest Shield Talisman. So I've got some damage resistance. One of the things I can come from the Prager Shapiro crowd is the notion that if you take away the Judeo-Christian values from America, you destroy America and you have nothing. Strongly disagree. When you take away religion from the founding, focus on the Treaty of Tripoli, which thinks that America was in no way founded as a Christian, what you are stuck with is a constitution that guarantees Christians, Muslims, atheists, Jews, and anybody else the right to worship and believe as they choose. You have a freedom of speech. We have all sorts of things. And I think that if you really were to get down to brass tacks with what Prager and Shapiro really is they don't want a society where everybody is equal. They want a society where culture is dictated by Christians and Jews. Because if you don't want secularism, it means you want some form of religious freedom. Prager complains about the most is the dangers of secularism. But I think that what Prager doesn't understand is you can have a secular society that doesn't Joseph Stalin. I think what he doesn't get is that when you have people like Prager arguing that you need to have a religiously based society, that where the religious people dictate what is and isn't allowed, that's what causes people to want to stop people in the first place. That's my humble theory. Because me, I vacillate between the two. Honestly, I don't really give a shit about what religious people believe, as long as they're not forcing other people to believe it, or they're not trying to use their religion as a means to dictate what to do. Like if religion's just, you know, we believe irrational things, as long as you're not doing anything to compromise my rights, I don't care. But once it turns into my belief, it gets to dictate what you're allowed to do or not. That's when I start wanting to Stalin. You can say that makes me horrible because Joseph Stalin killed millions. But if you were to do that, you're missing a larger point. The larger point being is that I would prefer to just live in peace, where everybody minds their business, where Christians can be Christians, Muslims can be Muslims, and Jews can be Jews, so long as they respect other people's right to live as they choose. That even had a ring to it. I'm gonna grab this just for our while there, in case he wants it. By default, I don't want personal. But that changes when religious people make the argument that they get to persecute others, they get to vilify them, argue the murder of their children. Once they start doing that, I begin to think that maybe Joseph Stalin wasn't as wrong and insane as people. Well, it's not. It's not that they pretend Stalin is. I can't really say it's wrong. Really? You'd be like, well, how can you not say Stalin was wrong? Well, it's like, the problem is that these things aren't as simple as right or wrong. It's kind of like the unfortunate side effect of, because it's not like it's a true or false question, right? You know, now you could say that it's morally wrong to Stalin people, which I'd be inclined to agree with, but at the same time, I'd also say that it's wrong to reenact the Holocaust in Gaza. Now, one thing that people in the Prager camp like to do is they like to go, well, if you are an atheist, there is no objective right or wrong. How can you say that anything is right or wrong? And I suppose my response to that would be, there's a few things. I'd firstly say that anyone arguing that the Bible is the source of morality or that God is the source of morality doesn't get to lecture anyone on right versus wrong. If they're God saying that you're allowed to keep slaves and commit genocide, if God says you can. I'll start by saying that. But I would secondly say that as long as you have an ethical system and a criteria by which you judge things as right or wrong, you have an ethical reason to say things are either right or wrong. For instance, if you say, according to my ethical system, it's wrong to cause unnecessary harm, you actually do have a means of saying that doing the Stalin or doing the what's going on in Gaza are wrong. You have a means of saying that. Because you're measuring it by a set of criteria you have chosen. Now, you may have voluntarily chosen to opt into this, and they could say, well, you know, that's just your opinion. You know, Frank Turek likes to do the, well, it's just your opinion that murder stages is wrong. But the problem with that is he has to realize that it's also just his opinion that certain things are right. He could say that he appeals to a god. But the problem with a person that's taking something like Frank Turek's position on right or wrong is that he can't then say that slavery is wrong or that genocide is wrong because his own texts permit these things. Right? Whereas if I take on a moral system that says it is wrong to cause unnecessary harm to people, that sort of an ethical system is one where I actually can have a basis for it. You could argue that it's arbitrary, but I would argue that all of morality is arbitrary when you really get down to it. I like this. Look at this damage. We're only at level 12. That's these people, all of them spend immense. Yeah, my point though is that if they're gonna play the like we will want a sort of Milos. Should. All resistance is obvious with Superman. Yeah, the problem with Frank Turek's logic, actually, if you get down to it, is very simple. He'll say that an atheist lacks the means of saying that the Holocaust was wrong. The problem with that take is Romans 13. Romans 13 is the verse that states that Christians have to follow all of the laws. And since Christians have to follow all of the laws, they have to even follow the shitty ones. And that's the problem. And they'll try to say that the New Testament is against slavery because there's neither Jew nor Gentile, slave nor free. But they completely ignore the passage that says, slaves obey your earthly masters, even cruel ones. Like, if it doesn't say slaves, you shouldn't be slaves because slavery is wrong. If you haven't said that, that would be wonderful. I would actually respect Christianity. If they had the courage to say that. It'd be super cool. But instead they're like,
well, actually, you have to consider the historical context and the culture in which the text is written.
but that doesn't make sense. Because that's just moral relativism. If you're going to try and advocate for moral relativism, then you should stop bitching about it all the time. You know, because, like, that's kind of the biggins when it comes to the Praegers and Shapiros, is that, what am I getting at? I've had a brain fart. Not even the Praegers and the Shapiros, but what I'm saying is, like, because this is New Testament, since they're Jewish, they technically don't subscribe to the New Testament, even though they'll say, like, Bible free equals wisdom free, where they'll, like, even say stuff like, oh, I think Jesus had a lot of good things to say. Well, it's like, you don't get to have it both ways if you're Jewish, because at the end of the day, ironically, the big is that Jesus didn't come to continue Judaism. His whole deal was he was bitching about the Pharisees being hypocrites. Really though, I should have held the block button instead of just tapping it. It was too early on that. Essentially what Jesus did is he said, nobody comes to the Father except through me. That was always the big deal that Jewish people had with his teachings. That he was essentially claiming a monopoly on faith. It's kind of like my biggest gripe with Jesus, aside from all the other shit that's in the Testament. So they'll be like, oh, there's some nice things Jesus said. You know, they're kind of like paying lip service to it. So if you're Jewish, you don't believe he's the Messiah. Why are you giving Jesus a tug job? especially after he tries to like Hitler the authority. It's the length of these attacks. Like, I'm gonna parry it. And you get right in the fucking face. Let's counter. If you don't even believe he's the Messiah, why are you tugging him off? Makes no sense. Because really, if you want to dissect what Krager is actually getting at, he's not really getting at Bible free is wisdom free. He's more so getting at Torah free equals wisdom free. Even though he doesn't outright say it. I'd say that's like a rude thing for me to say, but I don't think it is. I think it's actually quite accurate. But yeah, my bigger point was with the Frank Turek's of the world. They'll say, well, an atheist can't tell you that Stalin was wrong or that Hitler was wrong. But my problem is that they can't either, because of Romans 13. At least a Christian can. That's very, very, very inappropriate of them. There's a reason I tried to do it that way. Oh, it's did it to draw attention. We still have extra miles. Yellow has carried this so far. Yeah, the big point, though, is that Frank Turek doesn't have a means of saying that Stalin or the Holocaust were wrong either, because Romans 13 tells him that he has to obey the government, even if they tell him to do bad things. Because all authorities are wrong. That's the bigger problem, I would say. Because, like, people like Prager and Frank Turek, they all travel in the same circles. Because what I'm getting at, if you really think about it, because I'm mainly focused on Christians and Jews, like, for Jewish people, their argument for saying that the Holocaust was wrong will not be identical between each Jewish person. But if I were to narrow down what essentially the people who worship Prager are arguing, is that morality is whatever God commands. And if that's the case, then they were off morally scot-free for the genocide of the Amalekites, and they're off scot-free for the genocide of the Palestinians, since we've got Netanyahu calling Palestinians Amalekites. Their argument would be that that genocide is morally permissible if God says it is. And there are Christians who argue the same thing, like William Lane Craig. They argue for divine command theory. That whatever God commands is good. But the problem is that if they're making this argument against a secularist who has no concept of God, a secularist will look at their moral system and go like, okay, I guess genocide is on the table now. And then what they'll do is they'll try to be like, see, we told you that these people are horrible and they're evil and they have no morals. But really, what it is, it's a very sneaky thing. They're creating a moral system that says if they commit slavery or genocide, it's permissible. The secular force doesn't. It's morally important. Whereas, if you're a secular person, I would argue that your options, if you want to be morally consistent, are going to come down to one of two positions. Your position will either be that slavery and genocide are always wrong, regardless of who does them, or you'll argue that they're permissible. One of the two. And if you're arguing that they're wrong, you're arguing that they are wrong in all cases. This is going to be tough. This is going to be really tough. But I think we can do it if we're able to respawn in a decent area. Hopefully it doesn't screw us. And it puts us in a decent place. Unfortunately, it's putting us in a less than ideal spot. Unless we approach. So. Largely my fault. I think we can get it. It's just we gotta bait them into such a situation whereas they have to attack us. And everybody else counters it. We just gotta be patient. If we're patient, we get free +2 weapons, a lot of experience, and in the end, it works out. was really inconvenient. This is really rough. Sometimes this happens. As long as we get the Night Executor down, and yeah, we should be fine. That was a little rough. That's cool. Stone Pebble. That's a pretty cool attack. Alright. So we should go there next. I suppose that's kind of it. Because, like, the reason that they want to say that an atheist can't say that the Holocaust was wrong or that Stalin was wrong. They're doing it to try and paint atheistic people as being incapable of morality, which they argue is rooted in their God. Again, the issue is, if morality is rooted, they also have to admit that they're subscribing to an ideology that says slavery and genocide are morally permissible. That's the issue. They'll try to make the argument that it's different because in their case, they've got God on their side. Started off rough, but we got it. That's the point. The point is when you start dealing with the moral argument, it devolves to moral system where they'll try to lecture you on how awful you are. But they ignore the fact that their ethical system isn't any better. It's just a giant case of special proof. Because what they do is they go, genocide is wrong unless God tells us to do it. And if that's the standard you're using, well, it's like, well, what happens, you know, if your God decides he doesn't like anyone? resistance. But if everybody does damage, I'm fine. probably going to be the last one tonight.
very aggravated because we got shut out of a pod. Does he help? No. Just stands there. Probably does. If he helped, this whole thing would be doable. Let's just do something. Because we're stuck in a position where it's just trash on trash on trash. What was the consequence for stuff? All this shit. Really, if you look at it. Just
expect that last one. The big point on the religious discussion, talking about moral arguments posited by the likes of Prager, Shapiro, Frank Turek, and William, is that I actually can say, as an atheist, that the Holocaust was immoral. All I need do is subscribe to an ideology that says unnecessary human suffering is immoral, and then stick to it. For them, their arguments generally come down to special pleading, because it turns into, as long as God says we can keep slaves and Hitler people, well, we can do these things. I argue that they are either always wrong, or they're not always wrong. And they're only wrong some of the time. Or they're always wrong. It's actually separate options. They're always wrong, acceptable of conditions, or it's either always wrong, or it's sometimes wrong, or it's not wrong. Those three choices. Personally, I want to see it's never to commit judgment. Yet, at the same time, when religious people argue things, it makes it hard for me to then go straight to the sentence. Reason being, they have no problems doing the same oftentimes. that right there is my first death. That's vicious. But yeah. Basically what I'm arguing, just to sum it up. Let's just see what we got here. Now that, I like that. The point I'm arguing is anybody making the moral argument for God is doing so from a place of hypocrisy. If, at the end of the day, religious folks have ideologies that are used to justify genocide, it's actually good. The problem we run into is that we now have the misfortune of having an ideology that permits genocide in the world. And so, and I'm not saying that what Stalin did was right. I'm not saying what Hitler did was right. Because as an atheist, Stalin would have probably Stalined me too. So it's not like I'm like, yay Stalin or yay Hitler. I'm not. The point is that it's hypocritical for a person like Dennis Prager, Frank Turek, or William Lane Craig to argue that secular ideologies are inherently genocidal or like have no means of saying that genocide is wrong. And the reason that it's dishonest is simple. It's dishonest because their ideology specifically permits it as long as God says it's okay. And that's the issue. Yeah. They subscribe to a genocide and slavery are permissible with conditions on, which is why they have no clothes. They are the emperor, they have no clothes, and they're also fat and gross. You know. That's my point. And the bigger point, as I've said multiple times, is if you're an atheist and you have an ideological system that says slavery is wrong or genocide is wrong or has like the general idea of unnecessary human suffering is wrong, as long as you have those sorts of precepts built into your ideology, yes, you can say that genocide is wrong, and yes, you can say that slavery is wrong. But the issue is that Christians and Jews, at the very least, have no such luxury, because if they want to say slavery is wrong, and if they want to say genocide is wrong, then they're in disagreement with their God, they're in disagreement with their Bible, and because of those two things, they have to say that slavery and genocide are wrong through an external moral source other than their God or the Bible.